What's up, everybody? It's Ulysses Owens Jr. I'm so excited to be here with you for my show from the drummer's perspective. I'm so excited. I'm actually again in another location. Last week, I was in Puerto Plata, Dominican Republic. I was on sort of a brief mini vacation, thanks to my dear friend Michelle. And now this week, I'm actually back to work. I'm in Wisconsin. I cannot tell you the city, but I'm in Wisconsin at a really cool artist retreat. It's actually called the Everwood Farmstead. And so I'm spending a few days here working on a lot of writing and a lot of vision forecasting kind of for next year. So that's kind of what I like to do, sort of middle of the year, really like August or so before school starts back. I like to always kind of, go somewhere and chill out for a few days and kind of figure out what's next for me. So anyway, so that's where I am now. And I'm actually at, thanks to the Glenwood Public Library, who's allowing me to have internet because there are very few places with fast internet here. So anyway, but welcome to Open Studio. I'm so excited for today's guest. As you know, we have been curating and working on this series for quite some time, and it's been airing since I would say mid-June. And I love Open Studio. For those that are just coming to this episode for the first time, Open Studio is an incredible jazz online learning platform. I'm fortunate to have several courses with them and many other great musicians like Christian McBride, Diane Reeves, and Peter Martin, the founder, co-founder, and Adam Manis, and so many other wonderful musicians are part of this platform, and they are the reason why these kinds of opportunities are created so that we could get deeper into the music. And so when they approached me about a series, which is what the drummer's perspective is, it was really my desire to create a show where we could really go into the mind of the drummer. And not just any drummer, but some of the greatest drummers on the planet, and really understand their process and how they arrived at being the musician that many of us admire. So, without further ado, as I get ready to introduce today's drummer, I have to tell you that I have such a fond love and care and respect for this man. When I met him, I was at a really, really rough place. I was in my final year at Juilliard. I ended up spending 5 years at Juilliard because they actually started the degree program midway through. I was one of four high school students that was admitted to Juilliard. And when I was admitted, they basically said, Ulysses, we aren't accredited yet for a Bachelor of Music degree. But if you get here, spend a couple of years, we're going to work on that accreditation process. But it may mean that you may spend some extra time because literally every year from my second year, they started adding courses. So by the time I got to my final year, my fifth year, I was tapped out. I did not really want to know much more about jazz. I kind of felt like the spirit of the music for me got a little covered up in the academic approach, and so I was just tapped out. And so they came to me and they said, Ulysses, we want your final year to be a year that you enjoy. Who do you want to study with? And I said, well, to be honest, there's a guy I want to study with. I doubt we're going to be able to get him, but this is who I want to study with. And they said, well, who? And I said, well, Billy Drummond. And they asked me why. And I said, well, because he seems like he has a perspective of the music and like an openness about music that I need right now. And so fast forward, I end up learning with Billy. And I remember the first lesson, he sat me in the drum room. And I'm thinking, he's going to hand me, this list of books I need to buy. And he's going to hand me all this stuff that I need to check out. And he literally just like looked at me and he was just like, so man, what do you want to do? And I was like, I told him my whole story. And he said, well, play something. And I remember playing something for him. And he said, well, you sound good. He said, but we need to open up your mind and open up your ears and your ideas about playing, because I think there's more to life and to music than what you may have had a chance to experience. And he said, and I just want to be here to help you with that. And so with that said, Billy has been a great friend, and he exposed me to music that I never dreamed of. And I have to tell you, and Billy, I don't know that I've ever shared this with you. You made me fall back in love with music. You made me fall back in love with playing the drums. You made me fall back in love with just the sheer joy that can come from the instrument. And I owe so much of that to you, and you are an incredible, generous spirit. So, everyone, please put your internet fingers together for my dear friend, instructor, the great Billy Drummond.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Ulysses, for saying that, and thank you for having me on this platform that you've created. It's unbelievable. All the
Thank you.
all the drummers I see that have been on here and that are scheduled to come on. So many of my favorite people and drummers, and you picked really really just great people. I
Thank
mean
you.
Nash and Hurlin and Terry and Nasheed. I mean, whew, man. Kudos to you, man.
Well,
You
thank
just
you.
tapped right into the mother load, man.
We're not playing no games over here.
Not at all, man. Wow, man. So thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here, man.
Well, man, I'm so thankful for you, Billy, and I really mean what I said in that you helped me to fall back in love with the music and what I would love to do. I have some questions here where I kind of want to allow people to get a little bit of an insight into what I had from you, and with you. And so, before we get into the questions, I got to have you kick off our talk with this amazing story you told me about Roy Haynes, before. So you got to tell us about that, and to kind of set it up. To tell our audience, I was saying that Billy has some of the most beautiful drums and cymbals on the planet, and I said to him
Oh,
at some point he's got to make sure that we allow the audience to see some of his amazing drums, and he answered me with this cool story about Roy Haynes. So
yeah. Well, when you said, "Can we let the audience see your drum set?" I was like, "Sure, sure." But and then I said, "Well, when I used to go see Roy Haynes all the time, and a couple of times he would just get up from the drums, and place is packed, and he's the center of attention. You know how Roy is. He's like,
mhm.
he's the hippest.
Yep.
He's the hippest in 10,000 people. He's the hippest person there. So he gets up from the drums and he just walks to the edge of the stage and kind of looks at his drums and just looks at the audience and
Mhm.
goes, "Just look at my drums. Everybody, just be quiet and look at my drums." And I thought, wow, this is the hippest. I mean, you never see anybody do that. His drums look hip.
Right,
He's hip.
right,
His drums look hip. Everything
right.
about it is just, it's just the epitome of of hipness. I
Yeah.
mean, so that's the story. I have a zillion Roy Haynes stories, and
Well,
and
well,
they're
we're gonna dig into
all
that.
okay. They're all just they're personified, in the way he is.
And he's still around playing great drums. So,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. I saw him, just before the pandemic. I saw him
Oh wow.
maybe 6 months before that, and it was just incredible to see
Yeah.
somebody. First of all, 94 years old or wherever it was when I saw him last, and it was just, I mean, it was just remarkable. Um, Maybe it's not the velocity that he had when he was
Hmm.
in his 20s or 30s or 40s or whatever, but the timing and
Right.
the placement of every beat
Yeah.
was so spot on and
Yeah.
meaningful and purposeful, and the intent was you can't be taught that.
Right.
That's something that has to come along with your life experience and your life's journey. And
Yeah.
I mean, you think about somebody like that. How many times has he sat down behind a set of drums?
Right. Right. Wow, I never thought about it like that, Billy. Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, how many times has he said? You think about that, man. It's just, and that's gigs, recordings, rehearsals,
Hmm.
practicing, which he might not. I don't know if he does that anymore, but I
Hmm.
mean, I can only imagine. It's not even something that he has to, you know, gear up to do. It's just
Hmm.
like getting up and walking into another room for him. That's how much he's a part of it. And
Right. Right.
so
Right. Right.
and so to me, when he says that, he still has that same kind of affection and excitement about
Hmm.
his drum set.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you know how we all were when we first got our first drum set, or we got
Yeah.
our first good snare drum, or our first
Hmm.
good cymbal, or our first good whatever. I mean, I can remember, just laying on the floor, just looking at my drums when I was a kid, just looking at them, just like
Wow.
the way they smelled, because they were new. You could still
Yeah.
smell the the stain from the wood
Yeah.
finish, all that
Yeah.
stuff, man. It's and for
Yeah.
somebody who's 94 years old to still
Yeah.
have that,
Right.
just
Right. Right.
lets you know how what an impact this
Right.
thing that we do can
Right.
have on can affect our lives, and it
Exactly.
comes out when he plays.
Exactly. Exactly. It same. I feel like for you too, Billy. Like since you started that conversation, like, can you tell us, what was that first drum set? What was that first pair, of sticks and cymbals that you got, and sort of that beginning journey for you with the drum set?
Well, the first drum, my grandmother gave me a drum when I was about 4 years old, just a wooden drum, with a like a wooden drum with wooden hoops. It was just like like it was I guess it was kind of a real drum, but it was kind of a toy drum, but it was real wood and it had snares
Hmm.
on it and then once my parents saw that I was really enthralled with this thing and actually had a little bit of talent,
Hmm.
um, because my father was a drummer, an amateur drummer, and so he had stopped playing by the time I came along, but he was still a huge music fan. So he had an unbelievably great record collection. Looking back on it now, I realize
Wow.
how great it was. It wasn't like thousands of records, but he had a sizable record collection, and it was chock full of all the right stuff.
Wow.
I had no idea. He was a
Hmm.
huge fan of Miles, Sonny
Hmm.
Rollins, Jimmy Smith, Art Blakey, Jackie McLean, uh, uh, Nancy Wilson,
Hmm.
all that kind of Cannonball, all that kind of stuff. And so now, now here I am at this age, and
Right.
they're still my favorite records.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And they're amongst the best records in the history of jazz and just in music in general. So that's how I kind of got started. And then I
Okay.
eventually they got me a drum set and then another drum set and then another drum set, and then by the time I was about 17 or 18, I was working and I was able to buy my first real name
Hmm.
brand drum set. Prior to that, they had all been um, drums like at that time in the 60s and 70s. uh, this is really interesting because at that time drums that were made in Japan were thought of as inferior. That's like if you couldn't afford,
Really?
yeah, if you couldn't afford, because in the United States there were really 5 or 6 American drum companies that were the drums to have. I think around the world, the American drum companies were the drum companies that professional drummers played. Aside from Premier, which was British, and
Right.
Sonar, which was German.
Right. Right.
Those were professional grade drums too.
Right.
But
Right.
in the United States, it was Gretsch,
Yeah, I was
Ludwig,
going to ask you that.
Slingerland,
Right.
Rogers,
Wow.
and then there was some smaller companies like Camco, and later on Fibes, and a couple of other smaller companies. But it was really Gretsch, Slingerland, Rogers, and Ludwig.
Hmm.
And then if you couldn't afford those, then you got drums that were made in Japan, and they had a variety of different names. And one of my first drum sets was called Zimgar, and uh,
Wow.
and they were made in Japan, and they were okay. And then I got
Hmm.
another drum set after that. I graduated to another drum set, which was just, it didn't have a name. It just, on the badge it just said "Made in Japan."
Wow.
And that's all. And that's what I played up until I was about 18 or 19 years old.
Okay.
And so,
Man.
and that's because it's weird. The first time I ever saw a professional drummer, like
Hmm.
on a Japanese drum set, was on the back of Herbie Hancock's Headhunters record, Harvey Mason. It said
Hmm.
Harvey Mason plays Yamaha drums, and I thought,
Hmm.
Yamaha drums. you know what? Because for
Yeah.
me, Yamaha was a motorcycle,
Right.
or
Right.
or kids, like the kids in my neighborhood. Some guys had mini bikes. I don't know if you
Hmm.
remember those mini
Of course.
bikes, but that's what I associated Yamaha with, not with
Wow.
a drum set. And I thought, Yamaha drum, and then right after that, it just next thing you know,
Right.
Billy Cobham is playing Tama drums,
Wow.
and then later on, and Steve Gadd emerges with Yamaha, and then all of a sudden, Pearl and Tama and Yamaha kind of like it was a complete turnaround, and
And then
everybody
they
was
took,
playing
yeah.
those drums.
And then they took over the market.
Then they took over the market,
Yeah,
and now
of
and
course.
now the American companies are starting to kind of come back, and they
Hmm.
always it wasn't about the drums being not good or anything. I think it was just the Japanese figured out how to do it and do it even better at that time, and just same thing with the cars. Back in the 60s and 70s, there were no Japanese cars on the road in the United
Wow.
States. It was Chrysler, Buick, Oldsmobile,
Hmm.
Ford, Chevrolet.
Hmm. Wow.
And then all of a sudden you started seeing, like the first time I saw a Honda car, I couldn't
Right.
believe it. I was like, wait a
Right.
minute, they make motorcycles. What are they?
Mm.
A car.
Wow.
This is just the way things kind of. I saw this
Mhm.
transform, and it was very interesting. So when cars changed, so did
Yeah.
drums.
Well, it's so interesting you talk about that with the Japanese drummers because I like, fast forward when I first started really getting into drum set was like in the 90s, and I think like one of my first set of drums was like a Mapex drum set,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which, were cool. But then I think when I was about 16 is when Yamaha switched and they started selling and making the Yamaha Maple Custom Absolute. So they had
Mm-hmm.
had all this success with the Maple Custom, which changed the drum industry.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, before that, I think it was the Recording Custom, and then when I came along, you had the Custom Absolute, which was sort of a thinner
Mm-hmm.
ply shell. And at
Mm-hmm.
that point, Yamaha was one of the greatest drum companies. I mean, all of us wanted to play those drums, so it was really interesting to hear like the beginning of your journey,
Mm-hmm.
how Japanese drums were sort of considered. I won't even say less than par, but they weren't really a serious contender versus some a few decades later,
Right.
um, where it was. And a lot of my heroes at the time were playing those drums. But I wanted to like with you talking about your drum selection and cymbal selection because we're gonna have a whole part of this interview where we talk about cymbals
Okay.
with you. But I wanted to ask you because you're like the cymbal king. But I
Ah.
wanted to ask you, Billy. Again back to your beginning journey. So you get this drum, you get these drums, these Japanese drums, and I know you were listening to jazz. But where did the idea of like match grip come? Because like you're one of the only drummers other than like a Bill Stewart that I've ever heard play match, but like you have the touch of obviously you're one of the greatest jazz drummers to ever live. So like, but I know you were listening to Roy and guys who like played traditional. So like, do you like what was that journey for you? You know?
Um. Wow, that's a good question. Um. You know what? I think it comes from the fact that when I was before I the whole time that I was learning how to play the drums and playing the drums, and when I was a little kid and all that kind of stuff,
Mm.
I wasn't playing jazz
Oh, okay.
exclusively. I mean, I was practicing jazz and I was listening to jazz, but the kids that I was playing with in my neighborhood and in the town that I lived in, we were playing like soul music, R&B music. So it was all backbeat stuff, and I never could get the backbeat thing in my left hand happening playing traditional grip. I always felt like I got a fatter sound playing match
Same,
grip.
same.
And so I always played both grips.
Hmm.
And even now when I play jazz, I don't play match grip the whole time. I go
Okay.
back and forth. I go back and forth between matched and and traditional grip. And it's kind of weird because as a when I was taking private snare drum lessons, um, when you first start getting into method books, snare drum
Hmm.
method, the Cerrone book and the
Yeah.
Albright and the Will, I never played match grip. I always played
Wow.
traditional grip, playing that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Whenever I read any, you know, snare drum music. I've never read snare drum music match grip. And
Wow.
so and so the traditional grip is the sound that I kind of is my reference.
Okay.
This is the best way I can put it.
Okay.
That's my reference sound. So when I go to play match grip,
Ah, yeah.
I'm still trying to get a traditional grip sound, but it doesn't sound like it because you're holding the stick with
Right.
more of your
Yeah.
hand. And
Yeah.
so the sound is different. So I try to nuance it to get it to sound more like traditional grip. And I don't think that if anyone heard a recording of me playing, they could tell if I'm playing
Right.
match grip or traditional grip. And that's my idea, because the sound that's in my head is the sound
Yeah.
that I'm trying to make. And
Right.
that sound, the reference is this,
So,
traditional
so I
grip.
want to go further with that though, Billy. Why is that the reference? So, because this is I'll tell you about the debate after you answer it. But there's
Okay.
always this debate, particularly today in 2021 with jazz drummers around traditional grip and all that. But why is it that the traditional sound or the sound of you on the drums with the traditional grip, why is that the reference for you?
Um, I don't know. It's just I guess only we can know
Right.
individually know about the nuances, the fine nuances. You know how it's a nuance. It's a nuance thing when you drag a stick on the snare drum ever so
Yeah.
slightly.
Yeah.
It's a nuance thing, right? And you only
Yeah.
know that. It's like I make the analogy a lot of times with students, like only you can brush your teeth, right? You
Hmm.
know the pressure, you know your
Right.
gums, you know what might hurt,
Yeah.
nobody else could really brush your teeth. It's the
Right.
same kind of a thing, it's the
Right.
same kind of a nuance thing. So
Yeah.
that's what it is. And then the other thing too is the visual
Mm.
for me, because I love the way people look when they play traditional grip. Like
Yeah.
seeing Al Foster
Yeah.
or Billy Higgins. I just like the way it looks. It just
Yeah.
looks. It has a look. That's
Yeah.
silly, but it is. It's and so it's always been that. And then like when you see somebody really playing great and they're playing like Buddy Rich or something, you see
Yeah.
that and it's just like, man, you know,
Yeah.
I got to get to that. And so, and again, it's all fueled by, for me, I practice rudiments. When I
Hmm.
practice stuff, I'm practicing
Hmm.
traditional grip all the time.
I love that because, I look at like a lot of like I was one of your students. I now have students, and I find that one of the disconnects with my generation of students is that they all kind of want to not fully acknowledge traditional grip and its relevance in, I think, the sound of bebop drumming or jazz
Mm-hmm.
drumming.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like my generation, which is, Kendrick Scott, Marcus Gilmore,
Mm-hmm.
Jamar, like a lot of that era of guys, like we play the way we play, but we also sort of reverence also like that is true, like that is the sound of jazz drums. So like,
Mm-hmm.
what are your ideas around, is a real jazz drummer someone that plays with traditional grip, and if you don't choose to play or learn traditional grip, does that make you less authentic? Do you have any ideas or any opinions around that?
Yeah, I don't think it. I don't. I mean, look at these
Okay.
two guys that are
Yeah.
above my head right now. Okay, if they play match grip, are you going to tell me they're not? They're not. And I saw them play a zillion times, and
Right.
by the time I got a chance to see Max, he was almost exclusively playing match grip.
Really?
Yeah, and then Tony was back and forth all the
Yeah.
time. All the time he was back and forth, and it didn't make a hill of beans difference as to what he could play with either
Yeah.
grip. It didn't
Do
make a
you
hill of
think
beans.
do you think people should learn both? Like, do you think jazz drummers today should learn traditional?
Um, well, I mean, I will say this. There is a here. This goes back to nuance again. There is a little bit of nuanced on both with both grips. There's something that this grip has that grip doesn't quite have, and vice versa. For me, like I would love to be able to slam a backbeat like Steve Ferrone
Yeah.
or Vinny Colaiuta, or
Yeah.
those guys. They can slam a backbeat, man. I saw Vinny playing with Sting, and it was
Mm.
bop,
Yeah.
bop, left hand like this. I'm like, man, how does he do it? But then,
Same here.
then you see Billy Cobb on match grip, and it's like,
Right.
whoo,
Yeah.
wait a minute now, and this all goes back to even what you were talking about, like the past, like when I was growing up. Um, if you were going to play out of the Portraits in Rhythm, Anthony J.
Mm.
Cerrone book, it was traditional grip.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even at the school that we're both at,
Mm-hmm.
hardly any of those classical percussionists play traditional grip on the snare drum.
Really?
None of them. None of them played traditional grip.
That's interesting.
So they've switched to this.
Interesting.
They've switched to this. And they can play buzz rolls and all that intricate
Yeah.
stuff that's in those, Podimsky and all those,
Mm-hmm.
Garwood Whaley and all those
Yeah.
books
Yeah.
where you have to really have your dynamic thing and your nuance thing.
Mm-hmm.
You really got to have that together. And
Mm-hmm.
I was always under the assumption back, 50 years ago when I was, kind of in that world a little bit, was that
Mm-hmm.
there's no way you can get that like this.
Mm-hmm.
French grip or German grip is for the timpani. That's
Mm-hmm.
for the timpani. That's not for the snare drum.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes sense that it's translated to the snare drum, because in every other instrument that they play in a classical percussion section is match grip. All the mallet
Right.
instruments are
It's
match
true.
grip. All the percussion instruments, triangle,
Right.
chimes, bass
Right.
drum,
Right. Right.
whatever, it's all match grip. And then they go to snare drum, and it's like this. Wait.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of makes sense that it's gone that way. So, but I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. I would
Great.
just tell a student to find whichever way that they can get the end result the best.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they
Right.
should do.
Beautiful, man. No, beautiful. Before we get deeper into the jazz part of your playing, I've heard you a few times mention Cerrone Portraits in Rhythm, which I learned out of that book. I know you
Mm-hmm.
and I, when I studied with you, we talked a lot about Will Coxon.
Mm-hmm.
You even gave me the Max Roach drum solo. Could you maybe briefly talk about what are a couple resources that most people on this call may not have an opportunity to study with you? Or study with a Lewis Nash or a Kenny Washington, or both of us are at the Juilliard School.
Mm-hmm.
What are some resources that could help drummers make sure their technique is at a good level? You mentioned classical snare drum studies, and I also had that path as well. The Delacroix stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
anything you want to throw out there, because a lot of the people that watch this episode, they are also looking at this as a learning resource,
Mm-hmm.
and they're from all over the world. So any level of books or resources that you want to give would be great.
Well, those books that you just named are all just like, they're kind of like, that's kind of the gold standard
Yeah.
of uh, of of snare drum material, and
Mm-hmm.
then they're based on the organization of singles and doubles, which
Mm-hmm.
is basically the rudiments. That's the organization of singles and doubles in patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So the rudiments, I would say, for hands and getting your hands together so that you can bring whatever creative ideas that you have into fruition, I would say, understanding and being able to play the rudiments so that you have
Mm-hmm.
these tools, this bag of tricks, whatever you want to call it, this resource of being able to put together whatever your mind can come up with.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything that we play is kind of, doubles and singles and
Right.
variations thereof. So
Right.
it's totally. I mean, the rudiments have been gone into outer space with some of these
Right.
variations on this theme. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but just the first 26 is
Mm-hmm.
enough to like get you in the zone.
Mm-hmm.
And then applying that to all four limbs.
Hmm.
And that'll get you in the zone, and that's a lot. That's man, that's a lot, man. That's a lot. So
Yeah.
that's that. I was really lucky. My only, not my only, my first legitimate snare drum teacher was a guy named Win Winfrey, a great
Mm.
teacher and a great drummer, and he turned me on to all that stuff right at the beginning.
Wow.
Cerrone, Pratt,
Hmm. Hmm.
Wilcoxon, Albright, all those
Hmm.
books. He turned me on to that stuff. When I was, I don't know, 13, 12, 13, 14 years old, man. So I'm really fortunate that I had somebody to like get me on the straight path right away. And it wasn't jazz drums, it wasn't drum set, it was just
Right.
that stuff, and so that really helped me a lot. And then the rudiment stuff happened um, happened early on, because once you, like, when you're in the fourth grade, you can join the school band. And so
Hmm.
when you back then, the music programs were good. And so my band director, they give you like the Haskell W hard
Yeah.
drum method, and I didn't know how to read music, and that's how
Mm.
I learned. And then also in the library, um, there was an LP, a record called the 26 American Standard Drum Rudiments,
Mm.
as played by five-time world rudimental drum champion Frank Arsenault.
Oh, wow.
Right. It was put out by the Ludwig Drum Company. And
Wow.
this cat, and I'd check it out of the library, in the school library. It was an LP, and I'd bring it home. You could keep it for 2 weeks, and you got to go turn
Yeah.
it back in and check it out. And I kept it at my house all school year, because nobody else would check it out, so I would check it out. So anyway, so that
Wow.
was that was, and this cat, if you can get it now. I actually found the CD version of it at oh gosh, what's the name of this place? Steve Weiss Music
Oh,
is like
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
online music
Yeah.
store.
Steve Weiss is killing.
Yeah, yeah, they have all kinds of stuff. So
Hmm.
it's by this guy Frank Arsenault, and this is 1968, 67, 68, 69, around that time.
Wow.
And this guy was the rudimental champion at that time. And this
Hmm.
cat, man, I mean, I listen to it now and I still just hang my head in shame, man. You gotta hear it, man. It's
Yeah, I'm gonna
so.
check it out as soon as we get off the call.
It's killing. Frank Arsenault, man. It
Yeah.
it. I mean, and this was probably done in the late '50s, early '60s. I don't
Yeah.
know when it was done, but I like it because he's playing on like a parade drum, a snare drum. So it doesn't sound like those tabletop things that you hear, like the
Yeah.
drum corps people play now, which
Right.
which is
Right.
cool and is really clean and everything. But to hear this guy with this kind of precision and
Right.
cleanliness
Yeah.
on a drum,
Right.
it blows your mind. And so that's been in my head my whole life.
Hmm.
It's just kind of something that I've never been able to escape from. It's kind of a reference. I'll never
Yeah.
be able to play that good, but at least I can. I have
Hmm.
I have hope.
Please. Well, I have a video that we're gonna end this chat with in a while that I think you're pretty close to it. Because your hands, man. As a matter of fact, I posted. I know you're not on Instagram and stuff, but I posted like a little clip of this solo of you. It was when you were at Smalls playing with your
Oh,
band. And I think
oh,
it's on the tune Little Bee's Poem or something, but you're playing like all this really hip, like snare drum stuff, man. And it's so interesting to hear you talk about the stuff from Frank Arsenault, because I was like, man, it was kind of like your version of marching rudimental playing, like the way you're blowing over this tune, and it's so beautiful. So I'm
oh
sure Frank
man.
Arsenault would be very proud.
Oh man, this guy, you gotta hear this. You gotta
No,
hear
I'm gonna
this. I
check it
mean,
out.
and
I'm
then
checking it out.
then later on, when I heard Billy Cobham,
Oh yeah.
when Mahavishnu Orchestra, I it's just like whoa, and then
Wow.
of course I'd heard Philly Joe Jones and
Of course, yeah.
Max and Tony Williams, and
Right.
everybody has their own slant on this thing.
Right, right.
And and that's the beauty is like it kind of it you can draw from it
Right,
and go your own way with it.
right.
Once you kind of get a hold of it, and so
Yeah,
now everybody has their own version of it. Like
right,
we all know the Wilcoxon, but
right,
when you hear Philly Joe Jones, you go, whoa,
right.
whoa, that interpretation is just Charles Wilcoxon wouldn't have never dreamed that somebody could you know play Mr. Dress Up with his
Right.
roughing the single drag.
Exactly, exactly. Exactly. Man, Billy, I wanted to ask you about the gigging side. We've talked about kind of the building sense, right? Like the formal side of the rudiments and all that. But clearly, you have had a career where you played with some of the greatest musicians. What was the first gig? How did you figure out how to formulate all that stuff that you heard early on, into a sound for your first gig? And what are some insights you want to give us in terms of like what helped you to be that drummer that people wanted to call? Like obviously there's like you and your playing, but there's also clearly some things that you came to the table with understanding about how to play a gig. So what was your first gig, and then what are some tips that you've sort of carried throughout your life, for gigs?
Well, when you say first gig, what do you mean? Because the
I
first
mean, like your first like tour. Well, I would say maybe like, well, maybe your first gig, like playing like professionally, like someone paying you, and then maybe like your first jazz gig, like maybe you going on the road, like the thing that sort of started your journey.
well, it's kind of hard to pinpoint because before I
Okay.
moved to New York, what I was doing in Virginia, where I'm from, was
Hmm.
not jazz.
Wow.
I was playing in a top 40 band,
Wow.
and we played 5 nights a week for dancers, and we learned two
Wow.
songs off of the radio every week, and it could have been the Pretenders, Prince, Billy Ocean, whatever, Duran Duran. I mean, that's what I was doing because I wanted to I wanted to move to New York, and I didn't have any money. I still don't
Hmm.
have any money, but I really didn't have any money then.
That's every jazz musician or every musician right now.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I was doing. So I mean, and then before that, I was always playing. I had a kids band. I was playing with kids. I was playing. So I don't know. I mean, I think with every situation, you have to kind of, at least for me, you have to come to it with an open mind and a willingness to learn and do your job. Support. Not really about it's not really about me anyway. It's really about uh, playing the music that's going to be presented to the best of my ability. And if someone gives me an opportunity to interpret the way I see it
Mhm.
somewhat, then that's a plus for me. And then I have to accept my own
Mhm.
sound. That's the kind of a I think that's kind of difficult. One of the most difficult things to do is to be accepting of yourself, because you know how it is, man. We're,
Mm.
we're, we beat ourselves up, man. You go to a gig and it's like, man, I was sad. That wasn't happening. You beat yourself up, and then somebody comes up to you and tells you how great it was, and you're thinking to yourself, do you want to insult their intelligence by saying, "No, man," or do you want to accept it? It's hard to get to the point where you can just, thank you, I appreciate that, and
Yeah.
then go back to the room and cry your eyes out.
I love it. I love it.
So I don't know, man.
Okay.
For me, um, you know how it is, man. You got the chance to play with all these great people, and you just lucky and grateful to be there, and grateful that they've given you a chance. Maybe they've seen something in you where they might say,
Mhm.
well, he'll figure it out, or he
Mhm.
won't.
Mhm.
You'll figure it out by, and some, how some band leaders, some don't say nothing to you,
Mhm.
and some tell you exactly what they want, and then some,
Mhm.
and some maybe, slyly let you know that
Yep.
that's not kind of working, but but it's all good because
Right.
the thing that we do is we learn. Even if
Hmm.
we get fired, if we make a mistake, we get fired, or somebody, does,
Hmm.
everybody, I tell everybody, nobody is everybody's favorite drummer,
I'm still on that, Billy.
right? It's true, man. I mean, I mean, off camera, I can tell you
Yeah.
some stories about people that I've worked with or people that I've talked to, and you mentioned a drummer that we all, that's on my wall over here or whatever, and they don't,
Yeah.
and you're going, what?
Yeah.
You don't like that? What?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
nobody is everybody. Every drummer you can think of, there's
Right.
somebody that's gonna say, nah, that didn't work for me, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that
Wow.
all we can do is try to do our best, try to learn, try to make the music make the music come to life. And if it's somebody else's music or the band
Hmm.
leader or whatever, you're there you're
Hmm.
there to in a supportive role. And then,
Right.
if they give you an opportunity to express your opinion on a drum solo or whatever, then that's
Hmm.
your time to, okay,
Right.
here's how I feel about it right now,
Right.
since you're letting me,
Right. Right.
you asking me to do that. But then when it's come times to play and play the
Hmm.
music, then that's, I think, our number one priority.
Wow. No, I love that. And along the lines of gigs, one of the things I noticed, Billy, when I was studying with you, and even now, you have always had some of the most unique range of gigs. Like, I feel like, you would, I mean, because you always invited me, to your gigs, and like, on one regard, it'd be like, a Carla Bley thing. And then, then you would invite me to like see you do some stuff with like the Steve Kuhn trio. Then it would be like Marty Ehrlich at the Jazz Standard,
Right,
and
right, right.
it was just like, so like, how did you go from, what it sounds like kind of a very, I won't say narrow, but very like focused, kind of formalized way of playing an education and, top 40 to, you play what I like to call outside and inside gigs.
Hmm.
And you and I both know there's, in the jazz world, you have kind of like, there's like all these different categories.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like
yeah,
you're
yeah,
you're
yeah,
like
yeah.
one of the few drummers that kind of spans like all of those categories. So, I mean, and I know I know you're also really humble, but like, did you ever think about it like that way? Like, did you ever think about like getting the call from Carla Bley and Marty Ehrlich and, you know, these, like, or it just sort of happened that way,
Well, I didn't lobby for any of that stuff.
Right,
Certainly not. I didn't lobby for anything. I
right.
basically, well, the one thing I would have to say is that, prior to coming to New York, when I was in my teens and even my early 20s, when I was in my record buying phase, when I was buying a
Mm-hmm.
lot of records, and this was like the 70s, early
Mm-hmm.
70s up through, I don't know, the 80s, when I was buying a lot of records. Because I was in an environment where there wasn't this thing that you just described, this, oh, these people over here, they don't mix with these people down on this club,
Mm-hmm.
and these
Mm-hmm.
people over here, they got their thing, and that's not happening over there.
Right, right.
You know what I'm talking about, right, right,
Exactly.
right.
Which is,
So yeah, and that can that can be good because we all want to be a part of a group, a pack, a tribe, to a certain degree, because it's kind of a protection, and then you're in your zone and your comfort zone. But so when I was living in Virginia, when I was buying records, I didn't. No one said don't buy that Lee Morgan record because you should be listening to the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and vice
mm-hmm.
versa, right?
Hmm.
No one said that. And so records were come out. This is before YouTube and anything.
Hmm.
It was just like you're in the record store and you see a record that just came
Hmm.
out. It's like, wow, I don't know about these guys. Let me get this.
Okay.
Okay, and I don't know about these guys. Let me get this, and and they could be worlds apart, all under the banner of JAZZ,
Right. Right.
right? So I'm looking, I'm finding out about different drummers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So okay, I already know about a lot of them, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning. I see their names and I hear their names and I go, oh man, who's Alphonse Mouzon? Man, let me,
Mm.
you know what I mean? What I mean? Something like that. Who's Jan Christensen, man? Who's this guy?
Mm-hmm.
And and then one thing leads to another, and then you've
Right.
amassed somewhat of a diverse collection of music that you're
Mm-hmm.
listening to, and you're being influenced by,
Mm-hmm.
not because you're studying it. It's just that you're
Right.
listening to it, and nobody's telling you not to listen to it, and nobody's
Mm-hmm.
telling you not to enjoy it, or you can enjoy it, or it's not
Mm-hmm.
good. You're on your own. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not to say that people don't turn you on to music. I had a lot of people turn me on to music, and I was open, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, I made my own decisions about what I didn't like,
Right. Right.
and that's just based on my own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when it came time for me to be, and I never dreamed I would play with any of these people
Mm-hmm.
that I was listening to. I never
Hmm.
dreamed Bobby Hutcherson or Andrew Hill, or
Yeah.
I never dreamed of it. They were just people, in the stars on the backs of these records that I was in love with, and I was in love
Mm-hmm.
with their drummers. Okay, Joe Chambers. Wow,
Right. Right.
you know what I mean? Wow, he plays with Bobby Hutcherson. He plays with Andrew Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, he's incredible. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and then later on, fast forward 30 years or whatever, and then those people are calling you to play. So
Right.
I'm somewhat prepared for it because I was
Right.
listening to them
Right.
in a natural way. I'm not going
Right.
to say I was ready to play with them. I'm just saying at least I knew who they
Yeah.
were.
Right.
At least I knew who they were. So that's how it happened for me. It was
Yeah.
very kind of organic. I mean,
Yeah.
like that.
So, so I so love that you talked about that, Billy, because it helps me to segue into sort of what I think. Every person gives you something different, right? Like, you played with Andrew and Bobby and all these great musicians, and they deposited something beautiful, all of them, into you musically. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like for you, what you taught me was obviously being open, which I talked about earlier, but you really taught me how to listen. So with that point about like you had all these LPs, because obviously you have this incredible collection, but that's what prepared you for this career. Can you talk to us? I just want you to give us give the audience kind of a brief synopsis of like what is it to you to listen? Because I feel like you're one of the greatest listeners, and I remember you invited me over to your home, sitting me next to your hi-fi audio system, because for everybody he is an audiophile. Like he's
Don't tell him that, man.
I'm just saying, but what I will say is he has a very specific opinion about listening. But you sat me next to you, and I remember I can't even remember what the record was, but you played things, and I remember you would play something, and then you would stop, and then you would ask me things about it, and you play other things, and you started teaching me this process of being patient, being very still, making sure my spirit and mind and body, everything is all in the same room, and giving all of that to the music. So can you maybe talk about that as well, like how you learned to listen that way, and I know you may not want to talk about the audiophile side of your life, but how that's even affected how you play and listen.
Well, I don't know how to say how to answer that. I guess I could say this, um, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the audiophile thing. But I've always been attracted to the 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 sound.
Hmm.
If we're going to talk about drums, I've always been attracted to the sound that the drummer makes, and
Wow.
and and it and it and it and I'm attracted to their sound. I just
Hmm.
am. I mean, when I find it that it's remarkable that we as human beings, and then we as drummers, can take a wooden stick and hit a brass object, a cymbal, and be completely different than the next guy that does the same thing with the same
Wow.
stick and the same cymbal.
Wow.
And so when I listen, when I because I was naturally interested in that, in the sonics of the drummers that I admired, then listening kind of is the second best thing that you can do. Not the best thing to do is go hear them live. But if you're not able to do that, at least you can absorb their sound via the recordings that they make. And so that's kind of what it is. Like and so there were so many drummers that I wanted to sound just like. And so by hearing them constantly overloading, like talking about Joe Chambers, that cymbal sound is like, like in my head. It's like in my brain. Max Roach's drum sound
Yeah.
is in my head. And I could say that about 50 other drummers,
Right.
100 other drummers. It's their sound that I'm attracted to, and so some of them you go into heavier than others, but it's all of them are what differentiates them from not just what they play, but the sound that they make, and I'm attracted to, Al Foster. I mean, and then back in my nerdy days, it was about. I was young and nerdy and a little stupid, a lot stupid. And so I thought that the answer would be to he's playing on X drum, X cymbal.
Right.
I got to get one.
Yeah.
Because then I'll be able to
We've
sound
all
like,
done it.
I got to get one, man. Whether, like I used to be a Lewis Nash freak.
What?
And I saw him play a mile. Wait! You talked to Nash. Because I was just talking to him about that a couple of months ago. He was playing a milestone snare drum. You ever heard of those drums?
I've never even heard of that.
This is a drum that was made in Canada. Milestone. It's fiberglass. Nash had one, man. I heard that drum. I heard him play with Betty Carter, man. I was like, whew, a snare drum, man. It was Nash too. You know how Nash is. He's unbelievable. So it's Nash,
Right.
and then that snare drum. I wanted the package. I said, if I'm gonna be able to play like him, at least I can get the snare drum. That'll help me at least get my foot in the door. I didn't realize that's the stupidest thing I ever. But anyway, so I did that with everybody. So I got one. Kenny Washington. I was a Kenny Washington nut.
This is crazy to me because these are all your peers, right?
Man. So I asked Washington, which I could call him up right now. He'll start laughing. He was playing on a Keplinger, a solid.
Yeah, I heard about that too.
A solid metal. I mean, weighs 50 pounds.
Yeah.
I had to have one, man. I got to get that sound. And then
Wow.
I got to get a 22-inch K, Tony Williams. When I heard Four More, gotta get it.
Yeah.
I got to get a 20-inch with rivets, Elvin. Gotta get it. I got to get a 602, Roy Haynes, flat ride. Gotta get it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the nerdy, naive kid part.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part where you just you're not really thinking right. But that's the way. It's okay. It's healthy.
Yeah.
We all have done that with our idols and stuff, and our people that we love and stuff like that. Then as you mature, you realize that don't have nothing to do with it. Those guys could play on a shoebox or a drum case and still sound the way. All those guys have set in on my drums. Haynes, Ben Riley, Higgins, Al. They all set in on my drums, and it turned into instant. Like I had Gretsch drums and K's. Roy Haynes set in on my drums, tuned up snare drum. Now all of a sudden, feisty flat ride. What? How did this happen? I get back on the drums. It's back to my drums.
Wow.
Instant, man. You know what I mean? So it's I'm just telling this story because it's all healthy. It's all healthy because you're all trying, and it goes back to the listening part. Is that I'm trying to get their sound, and that's in lieu of not being able to go hear them up close and
Yeah.
personal. And then when I was in Virginia, I didn't. Billy Higgins never came to Virginia.
Yeah.
You know, how am I going to hear that sound except
Hmm.
for on records? And
So
so
with
that's
that said, Billy, sorry, jumping in. With that said, how like what would you say are 2 or 3 tips for people to listen? Like because I feel like the fact that you can even hear Roy, had his snare drum tuned, high, or that like obviously Roy's playing, but your ears led you to these certain kind of understandings or mysteries about different people's playing. So what would you say to these, to our audience? Like what are some keys to like deep listening that or even microscopic listening? Like what would you say? Like how did you learn the process of being able to decipher sound?
I don't know. I mean, the more you listen to a person,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes very apparent that that person is an individual and has a sound, and it
Mm-hmm.
keeps reoccurring on every recording that you hear. Every
Mm-hmm.
time you hear him, and then you start to realize I can pick that person out of a hat. Like it's in
Mm-hmm.
10 seconds. I know who it is by their touch, by their sound. Their sound is like this. It's this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know that, man. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like you've got a sound. And it takes a while to develop it because it's an amalgamation of all the things that you've absorbed in your life plus
Mm-hmm.
you. So all of
Mm-hmm.
those influences, if you you know listen to if you OD'd on this guy or that guy,
Mm-hmm.
then that's in there, but you're not going to sound like them. But
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be some things in there that come up, but it's
Mm-hmm.
synthesized through your own space. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's going to sound different. And that's why you're going to eventually sound like you. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
happens. I think the listening just, it's kind of like conditioning.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like conditioning. And you can listen too much. You,
Ah,
you have to give yourself a break and start to fine tune your own thing so that you're
wow.
sounding the way that you want to sound. You know,
So we gotta go. Sorry, go ahead. You gotta unpack that more, Billy. Sorry, go.
well, I'm just saying, you can this happens, and you're in the zone where you're making a lot of records. You've made a lot of records, and when you probably first started making a record, this is what happened with me. I wasn't totally comfortable with my sound.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't want to sound like that. I want to sound like
Mm-hmm.
this. But so
That's so
so
true.
right. But then after a while, you have to accept that, maybe that's just the way I sound. And so maybe I just have to fine tune that. And then accept it and fine tune it so that it goes where you want to go. It becomes who you are. And then, after a while, people are gonna, people have said this to me. I was driving. I heard the record, and I knew it was you, but I didn't want to. I wanted to make sure, and I pulled over, and I was
Mm-hmm.
right. That's when
Mm-hmm.
you. That's when I think that you. That's when you've. But it takes a long time. It takes a long time. It
Yeah.
takes. It takes. It takes. One step forward, two steps back. It takes
Yeah.
a long time for it to happen. But it does happen, and then
Mm-hmm.
once you accept it and start to refine it and fine tune it over and over and over again, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's just is. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
it's just like you are. You walk into a room
Right.
and nobody says who's that. If they know
Right.
you,
Right.
that's Ulysses. Hey man, what's up?
Right. Right.
You
Right.
know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's plain as day, and I know
Yeah.
you know that, and you see
Yeah.
it when you hear
Right.
Max. You know it's not Art
Right.
Blakey.
Right. Right. Right.
You know
Right.
you hear Kendrick, and
Mm-hmm.
you know it's not Jonathan Blake.
Right.
You
Right.
hear Kenny, you know it's not Lewis.
Right. Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Right? They
Right.
got their sound, man, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful, man. I love it, and
Yeah.
that's what it's about.
I love that you talked about the listening but I don't think anybody's ever in my series of interviews have ever said what you just said about there is a point where you not necessarily stop listening, but you have to step away and you have to let sort of that evolution happen of sound.
Yeah.
Because for all of my drum teachers, same like you, Lewis, Kenny, Carl, I wanted to be all of you all. But I think once I started making records, to your point, you do settle in, and I think that is a part, because I feel like a lot of my students or of this generation, I don't know that they're doing the deep listening. I think they have access to more music than any of us ever had, but I
Right.
don't know that the deep sort of microscopic listening is happening. But then to your other point, I think having that space of being able to play, or even the fact that these cats can get on social media and they can sync up 3 different videos and all play together, I think there is a level of individuality that
Mm-hmm.
musicians are able to get to maybe sooner
Mm-hmm.
now, because they're aware of so much stuff. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I know that we're getting close to time, but I would be remiss if I had you on the call and did not ask you to talk a little bit about Gretsch drums, Zildjian cymbals, and your cymbal collection that we all are envious of in the drum industry. Um,
I don't know about that, man. Well, that
and
picture, that's not my symbol, but
that's
okay.
good. Can you post the other one, Rachel? There's another one I think of a setup of his drums, which is, I think he's in the studio. Yeah, there's
Oh
some stuff
yeah,
of you in
yeah.
your house. And I think there's another one of him in the studio, like a player's perspective. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
And I remember you were the
Wow.
first one to like introduce me to like Spicicino symbols and all that. So any drum gear nerd symbol rant you want to go on for a second, I would greatly appreciate, because I'm a fellow drum nerd.
Yeah, that's right. I think it kind of comes with the territory, man. I mean, for the most part. But I find that my like my students, a lot of them are not. They don't. They don't have a drum uh, a drum kind of a love
Really?
of the instruments. They don't
Okay.
they don't they could give a hoot about what brand it is, or and
Hmm.
tha- and that's okay. But when I was growing up, um, the world was a lot smaller, probably,
Hmm.
maybe, because all you saw was your reference was like, okay, in a magazine, Downbeat or something,
Hmm.
there was all these ads, there were ads for, for the drummers that you liked, and whether it's
Hmm.
Elvin or,
Right.
so for me, in the '60s and '70s, all the drummers that I liked, well, most of the drummers that I liked, they all played Gretsch drums,
Hmm.
right? And there were some exceptions. Buddy Rich played Ludwig, and
Hmm.
Lewis Hayes and Roy Brooks, they played Rogers, and
Hmm.
you know, no, Buddy Rich played Slingerland.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say,
Buddy
yeah,
Rich
please
played.
swing
Yeah, he
on.
played Slingerland,
Yeah.
and Joe Morello
Yeah.
played Ludwig. Thigpen
Yeah.
played Ludwig. So, but the drummers that I really kind of gravitated to was the Gretsch drum guys. So, and then that went along with the music that I was listening to. I was listening to a
Hmm.
lot of those records that my dad had of Miles and Art Blakey and all that stuff. So that's what the sound that was in my head, and the image which was in my head of those guys.
Hmm.
Max with his tie on, and Art Taylor, mustache, and
Hmm.
Art Blakey, all those, that was the image went along with those recordings. So I wanted that sound and that whole thing. So that's what and still to this day, that's what I
Yeah.
like, and
Hmm.
that's the sound that I kind of, yeah, there we go. So yeah, so anyway, but that's me. That was then. That was the
Right.
time, and so that's kind of what was happening at that
So.
time, and then later on, like I said, there were other
Hmm.
other artists, drummers that I liked that didn't play Gretsch drums, but by that
Right.
time it didn't really matter. It was just like,
Right.
man, whoever's playing whatever, I don't care.
Hmm.
So anyway, that's kind of how that's what that was all about for me
Okay.
at that time, especially. You know.
And then with symbols, like what would you say, like, because I feel like, and also you were so gracious in helping me to find the right symbols. But like when you think about like a ride cymbal, maybe just like a ride cymbal, side cymbal, and a hi-hat, like what are you listening for as you piece together like the family of symbols,
Oh
like
wow, yeah.
for like a setup? Because I've seen you you know pull up a set of Spitzakinos, and even the way you play, like with all the enharmonics and all that, like I feel like you understand how to match symbols. So like what are you hearing when you think about like a set of symbols to play for a gig?
Wow. Well, I pretty much play the same symbols all the time. I don't really have, and I have a ton of symbols.
Yeah.
It's weird, man, because, well, first of all, this is weird. I like 22s. I'm a
Yeah.
22 ride symbol guy, and I like my ride symbol to kind of be a crash symbol.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't really go for the symbols that they have. You've got to play this on your left side. You've got to,
Yeah.
the left side symbol, and this is the.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I just want the symbol to do whatever I want it to do, and if it has the
Yeah.
characteristics that I like, it should be able to do what I want to do. If I want to make it
Hmm.
then
Right.
it should do that. If I want to make it attack with a
Hmm.
with a real attack, I want it to do that. If
Hmm.
if I want it to build, it should do that. I don't want a
Hmm.
symbol that's kind of specialized. Myself, I
Hmm.
can see why would people would want that if they had a big drum setup where they
Right.
had 7 or 8 cymbals. I only have 2 cymbals and then a kind of a crash cymbal, but
Right.
my 2 main cymbals, if I didn't have a crash cymbal, could do everything.
Hmm.
And so that's what I want them to kind of do everything, because when I again back listening to those recordings that I grew up on, those guys didn't have really a lot of cymbals.
Hmm.
They were 2, maybe 3, but
Hmm.
and they stayed on one to do almost everything.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so that's kind of what I kind of have in my brain about symbols. But I listen. I like a. I you know
Yeah.
I'd love to find a really good China.
Hmm.
I have a ton of flat rides. I just can't.
Yeah.
I just don't have the space in my setup, or I
Hmm.
haven't allotted a space in my setup to utilize them. But I,
Hmm.
I like it because of course, I was enthralled with Roy Haynes and
Hmm.
Jack DeJohnette when they were playing flat rides and
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. And so all these, again, relating to all these sounds,
Hmm.
related came back to the symbol. I was into Jack DeJohnette really heavy in the 70s,
Hmm.
and so he was playing Peisty Dark rides,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so I had to have one. And I had to have it, and the same thing with all these other people. So,
Yeah.
I mean, but for me personally, I kind of have a sound in my head that's based on
Yeah.
15, 20 different people, and there's an
Yeah.
amalgamation, and now I just kind of try to nuance whatever sound that might, I'm not
Yeah.
really thinking about, okay, now I'm going to make it sound like this guy. I don't think like that. It just sounds the way I sound now.
Hmm.
And it's based
Yeah.
on all these people that are in my head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
they all have a different sound.
Yep. Yep.
They all have a and not one is better than the other one, and not one is more special to me than the other one.
Hmm.
You know?
No, and that's what I love about your playing, and I feel like that's what you taught me too, to make sure that whatever I play, whether it's 22, 20, 18, whatever, but to be very intentional,
Yeah.
about that sound. With that said, man, and you've been so gracious with your time. Can you tell us, kind of what you have coming up? I know we were talking about how we're all kind of trying to, get back to work in our different ways, but I know you have, a band. I know you have some, recordings out there. You have some things that you're excited about. So anything you want to share with us, or where we can come hear you soon, and any of that you want to share, we'll be very happy to hear.
Right, right. Well, yeah. Well, my next gig with my band is going to be in October at
Nice.
Smalls, and then I
Nice.
have something coming up shortly thereafter. So
Cool.
just stay tuned. And then and then I'm doing other stuff between now and then, and I just got back from Copenhagen 2 weeks ago, and that was my first time being on an airplane since February of 2020. So that was a
Mm,
trip,
mm,
literally. Just traveling is just
mm.
not for the faint of heart
Yep.
anymore. And it was always, I had some, you know, had some things to it. But now with the protocols that are in place
Mm,
for us to go from one country to another, it's very very taxing on you.
mm-hmm.
So and that was really nice. I played the Copenhagen Jazz Festival and played some other gigs surrounding Copenhagen and in Copenhagen, and then got a chance to do a recording with
Nice.
some great musicians over there, and
Great.
so that was a lot of fun. And so I've got things are starting to kind of pick up a little bit. I just got
Great.
through playing a gig last weekend with a saxophone player, Benny Wallace, up in
Oh yeah.
Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know Benny.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
Benny.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was nice, and nice band with Donald
Mm,
Vega and Peter
nice.
Washington, and so that was a lot of fun. And I'm doing another one coming up in next weekend, the weekend of the
Mm-hmm.
15th. That's happening, and then I got some stuff coming up with David Hazeltine,
Nice.
um, and so things are starting to
Good.
open up, and let's just pray
Good.
that
Right.
this thing that's going on doesn't come back to slap us in the face again. And it seems like it's kind
Yeah.
of happening. So
Yeah.
we all need to beat this thing so that we can get back to
Exactly.
sharing music with people, because we need
Exactly.
them. We need them, and I think they need us, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Billy, as before I let you go, and everyone knows I'm gonna actually end with some good music. But what would you say is probably the best piece of advice that someone has ever given you, be it drums, be it music, or be it life, that has helped you to become or helped you be the musician, an educator, and that you are?
Wow. I don't know if I could single out a I don't know if I could single out any one one thing. I feel like I've learned so much from all these people
Hmm.
that play better than me. That's the thing. Not drummers, and I'm not even talking about drummers. I'm just talking about all these musicians that I got a chance
Hmm.
to play with. That like the people that we named, and Sonny Rollins and
Hmm.
Horace Silver and Freddie Hubbard and all these people. Man, when you see that and hear that, you know how it is. When you see that and hear that up close and personal, and you're playing with them, that's the greatest piece of encouragement that you can get. They don't have to say anything. If you're smart enough and sensitive enough to recognize that, that level of genius in a lot of these cases, that's enough. That's a gift that they're sharing with you. And a lot of these guys, that I played with, they're not here anymore. You can say that
Hmm.
too. I'm sure there's people
Hmm.
that you played with early
Yep.
on that aren't here
Yep.
anymore. But that gift that they gave you by
Hmm.
playing with them is in there, man. And
Hmm.
every time you go to the bandstand, you're thinking about, man, I was witness to
Hmm.
something very
Hmm.
heavy. So I got to take this very, very seriously because somebody else did, and they showed me the way by just doing it.
Yep. Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the way I would say. So one of the things that I could say to people is play with people that are better than you.
Hmm.
You know,
Yep. Yep.
because if you do that and you sensitive enough, and intelligent enough to soak it all in, then that's the best gift that you could get.
Mm.
If you're going to do
Wow.
this, as your
Right.
life's work.
Right. Well, man, on that note, I want to thank you so much, Billy, for being a great friend and educator. And I guess I'll be seeing you soon
That's
back
right,
at,
man.
back at J Yard.
The hallowed
I'm sure.
halls. That's right.
But man, thank you so much. I appreciate you, Billy. And
Ulysses, thank you, man. This is a beautiful thing that you're doing, man, and
thank
I
you.
can't wait to see the other people that you're going to have on here, and
Thank you.
it's very inspiring.
Thank you.
It's very inspiring to me, and I'm sure to the thousands of other people that are watching these podcasts, man. So
Well,
kudos to you, kudos
thank you.
to you for doing it,
Thank
and
you.
kudos to you for staying in this stuff that we do, because we know what's happening.
Yeah, bro. It's crazy out here. So thank you, Billy.
Okay, Ulysses. All
All right,
right.
man. Well,
Ciao,
take care.
ciao. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
You
Thank
too. God
you.
bless you,
Thank
man.
you. Thank you too. And for those that are still here, I would not uh, have Billy here and you not get a chance to see his genius. I'm gonna play a video that I found of him with his band. I think the tune he's playing over is called Little B's Poem, but it is actually at Smalls, which he said he will be playing at in October. Before we play that video, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We will be here again next week with I think Nasheet Waits. And so I'm really, really excited about that. Nasheet is an incredible drummer. But I want you all to think about what Billy said, for those that like to kind of, I hope y'all are taking notes from different things that he said, but, make sure you play with people that are better than you. Also make sure that when you're listening, listen to as much music as you possibly can, but also make sure you leave room to step back and time for your sound to come through as well. And please stay in touch with me on Instagram at Ulysses Owens Jr. _ as well as Facebook. Also check out my website. Check out Open Studio. Feel free to keep sending us messages and comments and letting us know how much you love the series. And if there's a question you want me to ask the next person, so much of who I am and what I am is for you. So if there are things that you want me to share or to check out or include, I'm absolutely open to it. So thank you again. And this is From the Drummer's Perspective with your host, Ulysses Owens Jr. Thank you so much. And please stay on here just for a few minutes and check out the great Billy Drummond. Wow. Billy Drummond, y'all. That was amazing. Um, anyway, take care. See you next Wednesday.